Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 55 of Camera Position, a podcast about the creative side of photography. So, I've been away for a while. I've been away for a while making photographs, making work, and getting myself prepared for my new school year, but I hope I still have some people left out there who are interested in listening to ideas about photography and creativity in photography. And today I wanted to talk about size, image size. Does does size matter? That's one of those eternal questions, right? Does size matter? And I'll tell you why I've been thinking about size. Um, I first of all had a request from a buyer, somebody who wanted to collect one of my photographs for a picture larger than what I typically make. Now, I have in my studio here, I have an Epson 4000 printer, which can print on up to 17-inch wide paper. And now that I've kind of, well, not more or less, I've completely abandoned the darkroom as a printing strategy. So now I am pretty much completely committed to printing digitally, and so I can print on 17-inch wide paper, so I can make a 16 by 20 inch-ish sized print. And for me, that's pretty much been about as big as I've ever made. But I had this request from somebody, could you make me a very large print? It was somebody who liked an image very much, but very much wanted to have a very large print to occupy a very large wall in their home. And who am I to say no? But there are, of course, some technical considerations to size. Can I get a big enough scan of my 4x5 negative? And with the Imicon scanner that I'm able to use at my place of employment, I am, in fact, able to get a big enough scan to make an image the size that this person wanted, which was a 30 by 40 inch print, which then the next problem was trying to find a spot to have it made. And I found a terrific place here in the Chicago metropolitan area where I live called the Print Lab, and I'll put a link to the Print Lab on the weblog page, cameraposition.com page, because they did a great job, and they were extremely accommodating and not terribly expensive in producing a large print for me. So the first thing that happened in terms of my exploration of this idea of size was that I produced this very large print, and seeing a huge print of your work is really something. I mean, if you haven't done it, you kind of owe it to yourself to make a print at least twice as big as what you normally make, just to see what it looks like. And it is a pretty remarkable experience. And I'm interested now, and having seen this large print, in exploring this idea of making even bigger photographs than the one that I have had made for this client, and which I delivered to the client a little while ago. So the idea of making a big print was sort of planted in my head. Well, then a few days after I kind of went through the process of making a scan and dealing with the interface with a lab, which, you know, again, is a sort of a different process, because if you're not used to the idea of interfacing with a lab, you know, you've got to give them a pilot print, which is what I did. I gave them a sample print of what it was that I wanted the print to look like, and the print lab did an amazing job of matching precisely the tone values, the coloration of the print that I would make in my own studio on their equipment. So that was terrific. But a few days after I went through that process of getting that print made, I went to the Art Institute of Chicago to see the exhibition of photographs by contemporary photographer Jeff Wall. Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Jeff Wall's work, a very major contemporary photographer out of Vancouver, Canada, a remarkable photographer. And in fact, we'll talk about him in a future episode of Camera Position. I've got some ideas that I want to talk about relative to Jeff Wall. But one of the most remarkable things about Wall, in addition to the exploration of thematic ideas that kind of go beyond documentary photography and combine documentary photography with the idea of manipulated imagery. But one of the most remarkable things about these pictures is how big they are. They're just enormously big, on the order of 5 by 8 feet in size, and they are mounted in they're transparency images mounted in light boxes that are then mounted on the wall. So they have a sort of luminosity about them that you're not really anticipating seeing in photographs, and they are extraordinarily big. And what they tend to do is they tend to look like, both because of the subject matter that Wall chooses and also because of the way in which the images are presented, both in size and in terms of this reliance on a transparency box, lit from behind. The pictures take on this quality of being very much like paintings from the grand era of huge painted images, painted canvases from the 1800s, the 1700s. So there was another sort of stroke in this idea of size. And then I thought back to way back in a far away, long ago place in my photographic life, back in art school days, when I had made a series of images that were incredibly small, really, really small, like half an inch by a quarter of an inch. And yet, when you looked at them carefully, either with the naked eye or better yet with a magnifying glass, and I had hung a magnifying glass on the wall next to these images when I presented them so that you could see them. But these tiny, tiny little images presented in very large mats. So these less than an inch on a side images that were presented in mats that were, say, 11 by 14 or 16 by 20. It called your attention to this little tiny thing. People wanted to see what they were. And it was really interesting to see what happened when these little itty-bitty images were hung on the wall and people walked by, and their natural sense of curiosity got the better of them, and they would go up to the image and begin to look at what it was that was inside the image. So here's the question that I'm asking. Here we are in an era of photography where, I was speaking with a curator in the photography department at the Art Institute of Chicago a while back, and asking, what's the deal with photographs being so much larger now? And he and I sort of agreed that really the deal was that photographers are making big prints because they can. Here we are in an era where we have large printmaking devices, or at least the access to large printmaking devices, and it's not nearly as big a deal to make a huge print these days as it used to be. So, in fact, the Art Institute of Chicago's gallery space, their vaults for photography, they've just recently remodeled them in order to accommodate the much, much larger photographs that they are now collecting. Compared to the photographs that they had that were quite a bit smaller. So here we are in this era where photography is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I am certain that this request for a much larger print of my work is not going to be the last request I will get, because photographs are getting larger and larger. And so the question I guess I have, and I don't know if I have an answer for this, but at what size does a photograph work best? And when posed with that question, somebody once asked Paul Strand, said, what size? How do you decide what size to make your photographs? And Strand simply said something like, I blow them up to a size that's one size too big, and then I make them a little bit smaller, which I kind of like that idea. But at what size do photographs work best? I suppose something has to do with the context in which they're being seen, the size of the room that they're being seen in. But really, I think as photographers, we need to make a decision for ourselves about the size that works best for our imagery, the size that works best for our type of photographs. Small, intimate photographs might be better seen in very small, intimate sizes. And as a large format photographer, back in the days before I had a consistent darkroom access, I would often make contact prints from my 4x5 inch negatives and use these beautiful little jewel-like objects as the final piece of my creative process. But now we have the ability to make much, much larger images, and I'm curious as to how we decide how big something should be. And for my money, what I decide, I guess, at least what I've begun to think about, is what I've decided was, well, this was the biggest printer I could afford to put into my space. The printer that prints up to a 17-inch wide paper. That was about as big a printer as I could get. But now that I've seen my work in this incredibly large size, I'm very curious to see what a number of other pieces would look like in this much, much larger size. So I'm going to work on producing a small set of images at a very, very large size and see what comes of it. Of course, one of the ways to really kind of see what comes of it is to figure out a way to get that work up somewhere, whether it's in your living room or in some sort of more public space. And the idea of exhibiting your work, whether it's exhibiting it privately or publicly, hanging it up so that you can take a look at it over a period of time and in a more neutral environment than where you typically create the work. So I think that's an important part, is being able to see the work in the context of being exhibited or hung up in some way, even if hanging up is simply push pinning it into the wall in the biggest space you've got, your garage, your living room, a hallway in your house, someplace that's big enough to accommodate the work that you are making. So size. Does size matter? And I think it does, and I think we have to come to grips with the fact that we're in this era where we can make incredibly large photographs, and then the question is, what are we going to do with that capacity to make these very large photographs? How are we going to cope with this idea of making very big images? And are we going to embrace it, or are we going to work in the other direction, making much smaller images? Typically, photographs have been small. So, and that kind of leads me around to an announcement of an exhibition that I have that is should be open, should be on the walls now or within the next day or so, at the University of Laverne in Laverne, California, in the Irene Carlson Gallery. And I'll put a link on the weblog page to the Irene Carlson Gallery so that anybody who is out in that area of California, about an hour east of Los Angeles, can go take a look at my work. I'd really appreciate it. I'm not going to be there for this exhibition. I won't be able to see it, and I would really appreciate anybody who has a chance to stop by and take a look at it and give me some feedback about how it looks. So if you happen to get a chance to visit the University of Laverne over the next month or so, and the Irene Carlson Gallery, I would really appreciate a little feedback on what the show looked like and what you thought of it. It looks like a really beautiful space, sort of a long, narrow hallway-like space, yet with beautiful lighting. And I sent out 33 photographs, and the curator is going to curate that down to maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 photographs. But I'd be very curious to see if anybody is out that way and has a chance to go take a look at the Irene Carlson Gallery of Photography at the University of Laverne. Another announcement I'd like to make is for anyone who is going to be at Photo Plus Expo in New York City in October, mid-October. I will be making a presentation there. I'm very excited to be doing this, a presentation about using media like podcasting and other kinds of media, some of which we'll be talking about in upcoming episodes of Camera Position, using media to help present your work and to help put yourself out there in the world. So I'm going to be talking about podcasting. I'm going to be talking about using flash movies and the way in which we can incorporate both visuals and audio to help explain who we are, what we're doing, and why we're doing it. So anybody who is going to be at Photo Plus Expo, I would first of all encourage you to go to Photo Plus Expo. I'm very excited to be able to be going. And secondly, if you happen to be there and you happen to catch my session, I would love to have you come up and say hi and tell me that you are a listener to Camera Position. Another little tidbit is that today I just recorded a new episode of the Photocast Network Focus Ring podcast with John Arnold from Great Britain and Chris Marquardt from Germany. And I know that some of you folks listen to their podcasts as well. And the three of us talked about a variety of photographic subjects and sort of had some fun conversations. So if you get a chance, go to the photocastnetwork.com weblog page, and you can either download the podcast right from there or subscribe to the Focus Ring podcast. And lastly, golly, I know that's a lot of little tips and bits and pieces here, but lastly, as a last piece, some of you I know already listened to my History of Photography podcast or have listened to previous sessions, and this is a podcast of my History of Photography course at College of DuPage in Glen Ellyn, Illinois, where I teach. And we've just started a new term, and because of starting a new term, we've just started a new session of the History of Photography. So new podcasts are coming down the pipe. One was published this past Monday, and so that's up there on the iTunes store. You can either type in Jeff Curto, or you can type in History of Photography, or you can find information about it on the cameraposition.com blog page. Thanks very much. Thanks for your patience in waiting for me to get back in front of the microphone. It has been a very, very busy summer for me, incredibly productive, lots of photographs, lots of great time with my kids, and I hope to be talking to you more frequently over the next few months, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Camera Position, a podcast about the creative side of photography. Camera Position is a proud member of the Photocast Network, your photo resource in the potosphere. photocastnetwork.com